Welcome, it's Jeremy Allen Gould. I'm coming to you today to confirm between God and of man that in fact the rumors that you have all heard are true. I started this podcast because I freaking love music. I was privileged enough to book amazing artists and bands in the past, and I was lucky enough to stay in touch with many of them to this day. This is a place to hear their stories. Thank you so much for riding along on this journey, and I hope you enjoy what you hear. With that said, the rumors are definitely true. Welcome back to this latest episode. This is Jeremy, and today I welcome the multi-instrumentalist, record producer, mixing engineer, and mastering engineer, TW Walsh. You definitely know TW from the bands Pedro the Lion, Headphones, Low Tom, as well as his solo records that are incredible. TW and I talk about some of those old records and some of his feelings and perspectives on them, which is really cool to hear. Some awesome nuggets in there, and it was just a really cool opportunity to connect with someone actually I did not know up till this point, which is really cool. Not that I know everyone, but I think it's really cool that I've been able to broaden this podcast a little bit and get to meet some new people. So I really want to thank TW for his time, and it's a really cool conversation I hope you thoroughly enjoy. So thanks, guys. Hey TW, thanks so much for joining my podcast. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Jeremy, thanks for asking. Nice to meet you.
Absolutely. So, tell me, what are you in Boston now currently, or where are you living? What's going on with in your life right now?
Yeah, I live near Boston. I grew up in Massachusetts in the Boston area, and I've lived here most of my life. I did live on the West Coast in Washington State for about 3.5 years in the early 2000s. But other than that period, I've lived in northeastern Massachusetts.
You love the cold weather?
Not really. I mean, at this point in my life, that's kind of my least favorite aspect of living here. A couple weeks ago, it was 10 below zero Fahrenheit, which is not common, but it is cold and precipitous and icy and snowy here. So, as I get older, maybe I'll find a more temperate place to hire.
There's definitely a charm to that area for sure. I definitely can understand, people wanting to stay there for sure.
Yeah, it's got a lot of good culture and a lot of interesting stuff happening.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's dig in and kind of tell me how life was growing up for you, how music was involved in your life, kind of how you started on this path, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, as I mentioned, I grew up in Massachusetts. I was born in 1975, so that'll probably contextualize some of the music stuff for you. I had a pretty, working class upbringing. My parents just worked jobs and didn't have a college education, and so we had a certain kind of like style of living that was in line with that. And as far as music goes, my dad had a pretty cool record collection. It wasn't very big, but he had good taste. I mean, it was all mainstream stuff. You know, it was there wasn't much of a music underground before like punk rock and DIY and stuff. So everybody was listening to the same records, obviously. But he was born in 50, so you know he was a teenager in the late 60s, and in his 20s and the 70s he was into stuff like the Stones and Zeppelin and Neil Young and I don't know, Allman Brothers and whatever else. And so he had that stuff in his record collection, and he would listen to that. But he was always into contemporary music too. So like in the 70s, before I was born, when I was young, I think he was getting into, you know, what was happening in the 70s. And in the late 70s, he kind of started getting into more British music and like a little bit of new wave and stuff like that, what was happening, like Elvis Costello and the Attractions and the Police, Graham Parker. And he was also into the Talking Heads quite a bit. So in the 80s, that was kind of the stuff that I was listening to in the house, like, you know, just stuff from his record collection from the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. But then that's also when, like, MTV came along. So I kind of got exposed to video games around that time, and then, like, you know, synthesizer music and drum machines and stuff, which were starting to really hit like mainstream music. And there was a lot of cool stuff happening, hip hop. So like, I really have never discriminated. Like I've really had a kind of an eclectic music taste and listened to a lot of different kinds of music, from, you know, classic rock to alternative rock to punk to indie to hip hop, jazz, reggae. So, you know, I definitely subscribe to that kind of adage that there's only good and bad music.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's a good melting pot too. It's I'm all over the place myself. I kind of, you know, started in, you know, punk rock, if you will, or you know the younger, and then my taste has grown over the years, and I appreciate the older stuff now. The older I get, you know, it's like, wow, I was a turd back in the day when I was like, I don't like this band or whatever.
Well, I think that you just kind of really where your taste gets cemented is kind of in your teenage years, and like you kind of are, you know, just at the mercy of whatever's happening in culture at that time. Yeah. So, you know, a lot of us have some questionable favorite bands in our past.
100% agree with that. That's sweet. So, kind of obviously with those influences, is that kind of what were some of the first bands you started? What kind of got you into the music world in terms of playing, and where did that go from there?
Yeah, I would say there were a few things that kind of happened in my life that kind of set me on the music path. One was just being around a lot of music in the house. And in the 80s, my dad got a hi-fi VHS player, it had like stereo audio output. So he could send the stereo. I mean, I'm sure my mom almost killed him for buying it because it would have been hundreds of dollars.
I bet.
But, you know, like a hi-fi VHS player. But then we could watch concert videos at home. And my dad loves like live music and concert videos, so he would be blasting the stuff on the stereo while the video was playing on the screen. And so there were a couple like really key things for me. He had these handful of videos that he would play all the time. The first one was The Song Remains the Same by Led Zeppelin. That concert movie was really something that opened my eyes to like the power of rock music and drums in particular. Like I got really into drums after watching Bonham on that video. just the sound, the power, the swing, the swagger. And so I kind of fell in love with Zeppelin at that point. They were kind of my first favorite band, you know, kind of diving deep into their catalog. And, you know, it was during, you know, back in those days, before streaming or anything, you really had to purchase the music and listen to it. And so as a kid without a job or whatever, I only had a handful of cassettes, you know, so it'd be like you'd get a new tape and you'd dive really deep on it.
Yeah.
That's all I would listen to for months on end. So I think I got Zeppelin 2 first, and then I started getting all their stuff. And then he also had like came a little bit later maybe, but Stopped Making Sense, the concert movie by the Talking Heads, and we watched that all the time. So I got into Talking Heads pretty hardcore. But then I started discovering like louder, like heavier music. Like I got into Metallica and Guns N' Roses, but Metallica I went really deep on in the late 80s. And then from there I got into things like, you know, Faith No More, and started getting into like alternative music in the really late 80s. It would be like Faith No More, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers put out like Mother's Milk, and then in the early 90s they did Blood Sugar Sex Magic. Yeah, and that's when like bands like Jane's Addiction, Pearl Jam put out 10, and Nirvana put out Nevermind, and I started getting into you know, more of that stuff. But around the same time I found Fugazi and DC hardcore and post-hardcore, and Bad Brains. I fell in love with Bad Brains. So it's kind of like starting to get into like more indie underground music. And at that point, when you start really listening to, you know, when you're younger and you're listening to like mainstream music on major label records, you don't necessarily imagine that you could like play music and play. So at the point where I started getting into more of that underground stuff, I think and punk, I started thinking about playing music more. I was actually playing in bands. I started playing drums when I was 12, and I think I played in my first band when I was about 13, and I was in a band with some other junior high kids, and then the main songwriter, I think he was like a junior or senior in high school actually, and so we had a band. And then from that point when I was 13 on, I kind of always was in a band, and we got better and more serious over time. So but it was always original stuff. Like we would occasionally play a cover, but it wasn't a normal part of our repertoire, you know.
Yeah. That's cool. What how long was that band going for? Was it pretty extensive, or was it through high school pretty much, or?
Yeah, so I think I was probably like I was in this band from 13 to 14 or 15, and then that kind of ended, and you know, around 90 I got into a band that kind of lasted then all the way. I would have been about a freshman or a sophomore in high school, and I got into a band that lasted all the way into the first couple years of college. So I was playing drums in this band, and we made some tapes, and we made like a full-length album when I was in college.
Oh, that's
cool.
cool.
By that point, I was in two bands. One was kind of like alternative rock or whatever you want to call it, and one was more like alt country, kind of like folk, within like kind of just like loud folk alt country, kind of influenced by you know, Sebado, Pavement.
Oh, I love Sebado.
And like Uncle Tupelo and some old folk singers and stuff. So I had these two bands going that both went for like 5 years, which is a long time when you're like a teenager and in your early 20s, you know.
Absolutely. Is that kind of what were you in the Boston area at that point as well doing that? Is that what did you go out west, or like how did I guess what was that
Yeah,
like?
I was still in Boston during those years. I went to college in Boston, and you know, most of the people in my bands were in colleges in the area or working, and we played in Boston clubs. We recorded in like Boston recording studios before, you know, home recording became a thing. And I was mostly a drummer at that point, but I had started playing guitar when I was about 16, and I was like into reading and stuff. So I would sometimes write music and or lyrics for songs in the bands, but I was still on the recordings and at shows. I was still like a drummer, and I would kind of record my own songs on 4-track in my school. You know.
Very cool. Are you proud of those songs, or is it something that you look back and you're like, well, you know, that was interesting?
You know, they're pretty good. I mean, I think they're good songs. I think I really, it took me a long time to find my singing voice. And I also didn't have a great grasp of like music theory. So I'd often write songs that like were in the wrong key for my voice. So, you know, my singing voice is still a work in progress, but back then in particular, it was a little bit rougher, you know, but they're good. They're good songs.
Well, maybe they'll see the light of day. Who's to say?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of the songs, you know, I did have a solo record that came out in '99, and you know, I was about 24 at that point, and some of the songs were a few years old. So, like, some of those songs have been released.
That's cool. That's very cool. So let's head to when and how you joined Pedro. I guess let's skip ahead to that and kind of talk about how that happened and kind of the process of that whole situation.
Yeah, I think I've talked about this stuff before, but I guess it's probably been a while. So I was in these bands. I was like, you know, graduating college, and I was playing drums in these bands, but I was also on the side, like at that point, already recording my own songs, like I mentioned, on 4-track. I had like a home studio, and I had a computer that I could mix down to and burn my own CDs, which was really uncommon back in those days. So I was kind of like cobbling together these systems to do mastering and to create CD masters and things like that. And I had these demos of my own songs, even though I took the bands I played drums in more seriously. But because I was into home recording, I was into this. I had a subscription to this. Maybe they didn't. I don't think they did subscriptions back then. I was into this magazine, this periodical called Tape Op. Are you familiar with that at all?
I don't think I've heard of that, actually.
Okay, so it's been around for like 25 or almost 30 years, and it's this like kind of independent magazine that is about audio engineering and like catered towards hobbyists and kind of semi-professionals, and it's really cool. They would interview cool bands, and they would cover cool music and stuff and talk to engineers. And so I had read they had a review section, and I always read the reviews and was looking for new music. So I read a review, and I don't remember which record it was, but it was of Pedro the Lion Records. It was either It's Hard to Find a Friend or The Only Reason I Feel Secure.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it was both of them, but it sounded cool, and I went out and bought the CDs, and I liked the CDs a lot, and I thought it was interesting music, like lyrically and songwriting. The arrangements were minimalistic back then. Like slowcore was a thing. Like it was kind of a popular thing. And you know, it was just a cool band, and I liked it, and I saw that they were on an independent label, and I thought, like, you know, this seems like I feel like sympathetic with this band, and maybe this would be a label that would be interested in some of my music. So I sent some of my solo songs on a CD to the label, and the guy liked it, and he reached out to me, and we started a correspondence via email. And
was that made in Mexico?
Yeah, Made in Mexico, which was a small Seattle label.
Yeah.
and he offered to put out my record, but he sent, when Pedro the Lion came through, like he asked me to go and hang out and meet them so that he could get a sense of if I was like a normal person. And like, so I went and met them at a show in Boston, and it was cool. We had a little hang, and I realized that the bass player and I had gone to the same college at the same time, and we recognized each other just by, we recognized each other's faces, and we had mutual friends. We were like the same age, and both were at Northeastern in Boston at the same time. And so like it was just a cool vibe. Like we liked each other, and I was a fan of what the band was doing, and Dave liked my songs, and so they Made in Mexico put out my record, and then that kind of just started friendship and like collaboration. So I was invited to go on tour with Pedro the Lion as an opening act because we were on the same label at the same time. And I was invited to play bass on this tour in the band because the bass player was leaving to start a career or something. There was a lot of like, throughout the history of Pedro the Lion, a lot of people like coming and going for various reasons, And so it was time for a new lineup. And so I did a tour with Pedro, like playing bass, and then opening as an opening act. Would switch instruments. Dave would play drums, Trey would play bass, and I would play guitar and sing for my stuff. Then Trey would play drums, I would play bass, and Dave would play guitar and sing for Pedro the Lion. And we did a tour. It was really fun. And this guy, Adam Voith, was our merch guy, and he had written a book, and it was just like, we just all had good senses of humor, and it was fun. And Adam and Trey are now both really successful booking agents.
Yeah. Very cool.
We still have played a lot of music together, me and Trey and stuff. So, and that was around the time when Dave, I think, was like finishing or writing Winners Never Quit, and he had transitioned over to Jade Tree Records, which was this label in Delaware, and a little bit bigger label. And the timing of everything I don't really remember, but that was roughly what was happening. Was like maybe that first tour was for Winners Never Quit, and then there was a couple tours. The timing's all kind of hazy, so I didn't play on Winners Never Quit, but like we had worked on one or two of the songs in rehearsals because Dave was still trying to figure stuff out at that point, and I contributed some like drumming ideas and whatnot. But so I was still working a job back in Boston, so and I was starting to have kids and stuff. So at that time, I was kind of Dave and I were more or less just friends, and he was trying to keep his band going, and it was kind of like a solo project with people coming and going. And then Control came around. I don't even know how much detail to go into all of the stuff. There's 25 years ago too, or 20, so it's difficult to remember some of the details.
Well, tell me some of your perspective on that record, and kind of, obviously you were involved in it pretty heavily, so just tell me kind of what you thought at the time. Did you think, oh, this is an incredible record? Did you think, I guess just tell me your feelings on how that whole thing went.
Yeah, so I wasn't super involved with it, to be honest. Like there's one song that I kind of co-wrote. The first song on the record, Options, is based on a riff that I wrote while we were on that tour that I was talking about. So I wrote that like guitar part, basically 3/4 of it, and then Dave liked it. He would just I was like playing it in the van or something, and I think I had recently heard Death Cab for the first time, and I kind of the style of guitar playing and arranging, and I was trying to kind of come up with something similar to something on We Have the Facts and We're Voting Yet. And Dave heard that riff that I was playing, and he liked it, and he asked if he could use it. And so he wrote options around it. And so that's my main contribution to that record, because he recorded that in Washington and I was living in Boston. Like, I heard demos and, I kind of knew what was happening, but we were living on other sides of the country.
Yeah.
And I was more or less just like, a friend and somebody he trusted to, like, get feedback on things.
Yeah.
We couldn't send files back and forth over the internet. It would be like somebody's got to FedEx you a CDR if you want to hear something they're working on, So I don't really remember much beyond, like, kind of knowing that he was working on a record. I contributed some ideas, and then, like, hearing it when it was done. And then my employment situation was changing and stuff, and he invited me to play in the band for the touring for Control. And that's kind of when I came on board after the record was done. And that was a larger band. I'm trying to remember. We did a lot of touring for Control, but maybe the first tour that we did, I was like playing second guitar because it was like loud on that record. And so there was a band. I think the band would have been like me and Dave on guitar, and I played keyboards on the songs that had keyboards, like Indian Summer and Magazine.
Yeah.
And then I think Casey Faubert was playing drums and John Ford was playing bass.
Oh, I love Jonathan. He's coming on the podcast soon.
Oh, cool. And then so, like, some of us also play, and then Damian Gerardo was on the tour as well, and Dave had produced a record for him called I Break Chairs, and that was
record
about the same time. And so, like, certain members of the Pedro the Lion band were playing in Damian's band, and then I was opening again as well. So that was the three of us, and so we were all playing like 2 or 3 sets a night, and it was bonkers,
I bet.
But it was cool. I mean, it seemed like things had gone up a slight notch because the band was on a new label, and like there was, the music was like obviously way more loud and kind of aggressive. I remember there always being, especially on that record, like starting to be people calling out like the content and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I actually didn't grow up within like the culture of evangelical Christianity. Like, I kind of grew up as basically vaguely Catholic, but actually just agnostic, and so I got involved with the band before I knew anything about like the Christian angle or like, Christian rock and all of this stuff. So over the years, it because of Dave's content and his transparency, like there was always a lot of controversy about the lyrics and stuff. I mean, it was ridiculous to me. People were like, talking about a swear in a song, like, I mean, it was crazy to me. But out of respect for the culture that my friends came out of and the struggle that they were dealing with, with people calling them out for ridiculous stuff, it was like I kind of just tried to stay an impartial observer for the most of the time. But it was exciting. The music was like super jamming. People were into it. And it was a fun series of tours. I'm not even sure exactly how many times we toured on that record before we made like Achilles Heel, but I was still living in Massachusetts at that point, so it wasn't like a thing where I was in the band. It was like the band was like Dave and whoever was around at the time or whoever he wanted to bring in for a specific project,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense. I guess that brings me to my next one, Achilles Heel. Let's talk about that one for a little bit. Any thoughts, memories, anything that you can, I don't know, kind of delve in on?
Yeah. So at that point, I had 2 children. I was no longer I had like kind of gotten laid off in post 9/11, like the market crashed and like I was working in technology. I got laid off from a specific job, and I had to make a decision like what I want to do. And I had really enjoyed going on tour, and I enjoyed writing and recording music. So I decided to move my family out to Washington State and like kind of get involved with what Dave was doing. And like I had a lot of friends out there, like really close friends. Like at that point, I was really close with Trey and his family. He had young kids, and like all our wives were friends and stuff, and it was like a really cool family vibe. We moved out to western Washington, out on the Kitsap Peninsula. So it's not like westernmost Washington, but it's on the other side of the Puget Sound. So it was a little funky. We were living in like a Navy town, and because that's where Dave was living at the time, out on the peninsula near Bainbridge Island kind of. And so he had like a barn on our friend's property. And so he was building a studio out there. So I went out there, and I had heard the demos, and they were interesting. It sounded like a little bit different than Control, but it was still pretty open-ended how things were gonna sound on the record. Initially, I was trying to get used to living in a new state and in a rural area, and trying to figure out my place in the creative process. The personnel seemed to be involved in the recording and the band and the writing. Like we knew that we had to make a record because it had been a couple of years. Dave had some songs, and he was kind of trying to finish the writing for the record. And there were different people around, and the roles were kind of constantly shifting. So there were different people at different times who were maybe kind of in the band or going to play on the record. And there was questions as to like whether I was going to play on the record or Dave was going to do it on his own. We were bringing different people in to try different things. I think that when you have multiple songwriters and multiple multi-instruments and instrumentalists in a band, it makes it really interesting, and that there's a lot of different kind of like combinations that you can try, but it also maybe can make things a little unfocused at times because it's like too many options. Yeah. So I think it became clear that like we were going to make some demos of the songs, and that's what we started to do. And it was mostly me and Dave working on that stuff, but there were some other people at different times, like I said, like people kind of coming and going, and wasn't clear like what this was going to look like. So I think like Casey Faubert was playing on some stuff, and I think Yuki Matthews was there for some of the time, and then like James McAllister, and they've all gone on to do like really, really cool stuff and have had cool careers. They're still making music. And we made a bunch of demos, and we made them in a rudimentary fashion, just a couple mics on the drums, and we were kind of like whoever wanted to play drums or bass or whatever just picked it up. And so over time we were making these demos, and then I think there was like some, and it was cool. It was like a more organic vibe. It was a little bit more like of a classic rock vibe than Control was. And I don't think it was necessarily because of my influence, but Dave was also listening to some different stuff, and we actually were trying to explore and find a sound. I don't think Dave wanted to make another Control style record. So we were just messing around, and so we ended up with all these demos. And then there was some kind of miscommunication, I think, with the label, and the label was like really pressuring us to like finish a record. They had given the band a small budget. We had like spent the budget on buying equipment or living expenses or whatever, and we had to deliver something, or there was some kind of weird ultimatum, and I can't remember exactly the details, but my impression is that it's like you got to give us a master in the next month, or like you have to wait 2 years if we're going to put out another record. So
unbelievable.
Yeah, so it was like we were kind of under some pressure, so we brought Chris Colbert out to help us mix, because we had this like half-finished studio. We had these crappy monitors. The room had no treatment. We had no idea how anything was actually sounding. So Chris helped us mix it, and we thought it was a cool record, like you know, and that's kind of what I remember. It was like a period of several months. Like I said, there were different people coming and going. We were exploring for a sound, and we kind of never really nailed anything specific. In retrospect, I think the best thing to do would have maybe been to be more deliberate about this, like have a set of material, find a studio, maybe work with a producer. But we didn't have anybody advising us, or like,
yeah.
We were just kids and like trying to figure out. We had no money, and we were just under these different pressures. And so I think it's got some cool songs on it, and it's got one of my songs on it. I wrote that song, Start Without Me, and Dave liked the song a lot, and he wanted to put it on the record. And we did a version of it that was fine. It wasn't the best song on the record. I have a version that we both liked better, but it was me playing everything and singing. So, it just kind of came together, and we put it out, and the band kept evolving or devolving. I don't know, from there.
Yeah. Well, it's a fantastic record. I mean, it's definitely it's cool that you say that you kind of were under pressure. It probably in some way was a better thing, because it really put something that is lasting, that not that, a producer is a different angle, bringing that in and stuff. So it's cool that you kind of organically did it, and it worked out the way it did. I think it's a fantastic record.
Yeah. And at that point, Dave was like really getting interested in synthesizers. So we were able to use synth on some of the record. Our friends were doing really cool stuff. Like I think Crystal Skulls was starting, and like everybody was getting into some really interesting directions musically. And it was a fun time. As I was like alluding to, I don't think we really realized the full potential there, but there were a lot of like financial life and creative pressures that kind of dictated what we were able to do. And I'm still proud of it. I haven't listened to it in a long time, but there's some songs on it that I like a lot.
Absolutely. Very cool. Let's go on to Headphones. I guess that's kind of a transition, obviously, because you were saying Dave was into keyboards and whatnot. So, kind of tell me about that record and how that started, and your involvement with that.
Yeah, my impression is that Dave probably, I think he started playing piano. That was like his first instrument when he was a kid, and so he kind of like wrote on piano sometimes, and he was into synths and the different sounds. Like I remember him saying that he was into what's that Herbie Hancock song from the 80s that was like
man, I don't know. I know Herbie Hancock, but I don't know.
Yeah, anyway, he was into synth, and like we grew up in the 80s, and synths were all over the place, and
sure.
We were all like we liked synths. And there was synths, I think there were synths on Control in Summer, and there was like a Rhodes or a Wurlitzer on Magazine. And then on Achilles Heel, we did some synth-based stuff, and there were like synth leads and synth pads and whatnot. Dave wanted to do an all-synth band, like all-synth project, and I think he kind of wanted to like change Pedro the Lion into a synth band, but everybody advised him not to do that. At that time, I think the idea would be that we diversify so that we could multiply our income a little bit by having these different projects, so we weren't like saturating the market, right? Like with 2 Pedro the Lion records every year or something. So the concept, Dave's idea of what we should do was always shifting, and it kept it interesting, and I was able to accommodate this because I could play different instruments and stuff. But at times it was challenging to get our footing a little bit. So the idea was like, let's do this synth band, and it'll be a separate band, a separate brand, like we can do whatever we want. And then like I was gonna start a band too, where it was like all the same people playing in these 3 different bands, but it was like one was synth with Dave singing, one was guitars with Dave singing, and then there was one band with like me singing. And so I was game to try it. You know, that was another situation where it was a bit of a rush to finish the record. I think Dave signed with this label Suicide Squeeze with the headphones. So there was a separate budget, a separate timeline. And the material was tough, like wasn't totally forthcoming. So like ultimately it was a bit of a scramble to finish that record. So it was like me and Dave and the drummer Frank Lenz.
Yeah, he's a beast.
Yeah. We got him as kind of a ringer because we were trying to finish this thing fast, and it was like, how do we do this? Like, we got to get some help. And then our sound guy, Jared Hankins, had he was a really talented recording engineer, and he had some cool gear. And so like we kind of, you know, hunkered down and tried to make this record. And we had some decent synths, but we had mostly like some cheaper synths like Korg and Alesis synths, and then there were some software synths on there. And we were just trying to make it happen. And I think Lenz plays all the drums on it. There was one bonus track that was kind of thrown together that I played drums on. And other than that, it's mostly Dave playing synth and writing. And then I did some degree. I'm not even sure I could tell you, like, if I listen to the record, who's playing.
You did.
You know what I mean? So I contributed some ideas and played some synths on that record. And then we did a bunch of touring.
Yeah.
And there was some interesting shows. We opened for Modest Mouse in Seattle, and we had 3 synth players at the front of the stage. It was me and Dave and Ken Murray, who had been playing bass, and Pedro the Lion, great musician and an awesome keyboard player too. So we did that was the best headphone show ever. It was the 3 of us playing synth at the front of the stage. Lenz played drums, and James McAllister, I believe, was playing a second drum set or playing percussion, and like it sounded great, and it was really fun. And then we did a bunch of touring after that, which was like just me and Dave, like Dave playing synth with his feet and his hands and singing and me playing drums. And so tried to keep that going for a while, but it was like we didn't have the right maybe like promotional or marketing pieces in place, and like, you know, it was all on a shoestring kind of budget, and it obviously didn't reach the kind of like audience that Pedro the Lion did. So at a certain point, it was like it didn't make sense financially to really keep pushing the issue. But I think it was a good creative. It was a good creative project. I'm proud of the record. I think like it really pushed me and my musicianship when there's just 2 of you on stage. I'm trying to play Frank Lenz's drum parts, you know, like, and make it convincing. And I think that, and Dave is like really multitasking, and I think that like we actually pulled it off. Like I've heard and seen some of these like live shows that we did, and you know, it's a big sound. Jared was doing the sound for us live, and it sounds great. And I think Dave and I both like pulled it off from a musicianship standpoint. And then I think he went on, like at a certain point, I decided I couldn't go out on the road and like lose money or break even and leave my wife and 2 kids at home. So, so Nick, this other friend of ours, Nick, who had been playing in Fleet Foxes, he came and played drums. I think he went out with Dave to do a handful of shows or another tour, something on drums. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I love that record. I think it's fantastic. I love how raw it sounds, and it's just, I don't know, it's just this great record. So
Yeah, I think that Jared did a really nice job too. Like I want to call him out because he had a vision for making each song have a distinct drum sound and a distinct sonic character, and
yeah,
so he made a lot of contributions to that record as well. And Frank played great. You know, it was cool.
absolutely, very very cool. Well, let's go on to the Low Tom records. Just to briefly talk about those. We have not much time left, so just wanted to kind of go over those records. Obviously, you've mentioned that you guys were friends over the years, and so that's kind of where did the idea come from, and what was the creativeness? You know, like where did it go? Hey, let's just do this. Where did that begin?
Yeah, again, it's tough to it's tough to go over all of this stuff in any degree of detail. It's 25 years worth of music making, but yeah. So with Low Tom, I'm trying to remember. Like I had met Jason Martin on tour when we had passed through Orange County, and we played cards and hung out and stuff, and we became friends. Pedro did some touring with Starflyer at that time. Like, who was in the band? I mean, it was like Len's playing drums. Richard Swift was keyboards and Jeff Cloud was playing bass. They were doing, like, we hung out with them when they were recording Old in Seattle. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I just got to know all of those guys at that time. And we did some touring with Starflyer where I'm trying to remember what happened. I think Lenz couldn't make it. And so I had to fill in on drums at the last minute to some shows and stuff for Starflyer. And we were just buddies. And then at a certain point, somebody had the idea that we should maybe do a project together. I don't remember who it was. It was probably Martin, who suggested that we have a band, like me and Martin and Dave and Trey, because we were all like good friends. We knew that we could come up with material, and we would have an excuse basically to get together and hang out. That was like, you know, like some people play golf or whatever with their buddies, but we like make
rock and roll.
Yeah. So let me think. I don't remember what year that would have been when we first started working on Low Tom, but I have no idea what year that was. But somebody suggested it. I flew out to like Southern California. Dave flew down from Seattle, and I think Trey had already moved to LA at that point. So we were holed up in a really small project studio, and we did a handful of songs. Like basically the way Low Tom worked mostly was that like I would come up with musical ideas and make demos. Martin would come up with musical ideas and make demos, and then we would kind of like filter through those, and then Dave would try to like kind of come up. He would kind of pick demos that he felt he could like sing over, like write some lyrics and vocals over, melodies. And so that first session, we got like 4 songs out of that. And then it wasn't until like another year or 2 later, I have no idea actually how much time went by, but I went back out. We had some more demos, and we recorded basic tracks for 4 more songs or whatever, and that we kind of had our shit together a little bit better at that point, you know. And so we had 2 different sessions, like a year apart or more, and Dave did all the vocals in like one weekend or something, wrote all the lyrics and finalized everything over a weekend, and then it was mixed by somebody that Martin knows. His name is J.R.
McNeely.
Yeah. And so then we had this record, and then like Trey is like a booking agent, so he wanted to like do some shows. Barsuk, agreed to put it. And we did a bunch of shows, like or 5, 6 shows. I don't know. Like it was fun. Everybody flew to Boston. we rehearsed for like one day for like 3 hours or something, and then played a show in Boston, and then we drove to New York, and then the next weekend or a couple weeks later, I have no idea when it was, like I flew out to LA or something, and then we played like LA and Orange County. I don't remember if we did a San Francisco show, but then we flew to Seattle. So we tried to play like everybody's hometown in the band, and luckily we were all lived near big cities, so it was like we would have audiences. I think at different times we had talked about trying to do Chicago and some other cities, but the logistics were just
a lot. Yeah, that makes sense. Well,
but
those are great. Yeah,
because we also did like KEXP and stuff.
Yeah.
It was fun. Like that was all. That was a good time, that first record.
Yeah, I mean, those are fantastic. I love hearing. It's weird because as a fan, you can hear kind of all four of your influences. You know, I was a big fan of Valor 100 for Trey, and you know, a big Starflyer fan, obviously, and you know, so it's just, you know, hearing everyone's individual input. It's to me, it's clear as day in all the songs, which is really cool.
Yeah, I kind of thought that it would have been cool if we had. I like bands that have like multiple singers, like the Beatles, obviously, Fugazi, and there was a band I liked a lot called Silkworm. I like these bands that have different songwriters and singers. So I wanted like Martin to be singing.
Same here, 100%.
And I wasn't super enthusiastic about me singing necessarily, but I just thought it would have been cool if we all sang. But I think Martin in particular wanted like a consistent like vision for the band, and he doesn't like singing live. So, but that's an alternate history that would have been cool. Like
absolutely.
And then we could have played we could have played back catalog songs too, because when we played those shows, that first bunch of shows, we had 8 songs, and so we would play the record, and then we would play the first 2 songs again as the encore.
That's amazing.
And if we had different like I even thought it would be cool to hear Dave singing like Starflyer songs and stuff. But nobody else in the band, nobody else in the band wanted to do that. I thought it was cool.
That's nuts. I would have, people would have lost their minds for sure. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, I really, I want to go back, I want to go forward to Fruitless Research. I know you've got plenty of solo records. They're all fantastic. But I kind of wanted to touch on this one because it definitely struck a chord with me. I really love that record. It's probably one of my favorite records of that year that came out. So you kind of maybe talk about that record a little bit. And I really gravitated to Fundamental Ground. And I just talk about that record and, you know, and that song possibly.
Yep. Yeah, sure. I think that's maybe my best full-length album. Like I appreciate that you like it. And Fundamental Ground is one of the better songs that I've written. Like maybe my favorite song of mine. So thank you. Just to give you some background, like I mentioned, I have been writing songs since probably 1990 or something like that. And my first solo record came out in 99 on Made in Mexico. I had another solo record on a label in Chicago in 2001 called Blue Law. So the first record in 99 is called How We Spend Our Days. And I had a record 2001 called Blue Laws, which my friend Frank Padalaro co-produced with me. And it's got some really cool, like, string arrangements on it and stuff, and that's kind of like my slow core record. And then had an EP in 2002 on another label, and then I was kind of from there I was like more focusing on working with Dave on Pedro the Lion and headphones and stuff for the next several years. I'm trying to remember the chronology. So then I had a band called the Soft Drugs. We did a couple of EPs, which later compiled as a record. And then I also made a solo record called Songs of Pain and Leisure, and that was around that same time that I had the Soft Drugs. I don't remember when that came out. But that record was because I felt like I I had like a new understanding of music based on all of my experience and being a professional musician, and I really felt like I wanted to kind of take another stab at making a good record. So I was really happy with Songs of Pain and Leisure. The next record, I had some songs, and I really wanted to explore like different types of arrangements and sounds and stuff, and I felt like it was time to work with a collaborator. And Yuki is an old friend, a good friend, and a really, really talented guy. He's definitely somebody. I know several people that kind of approach genius level when it comes to music and stuff, and he is one of those people. Like he has a really singular way of thinking about music, and it's like non-linear, it's very experimental, and he has a great ear for sound design. And so I wanted to work with Yuki on this record, and this was right when he was starting to get into doing production and stuff. Like he went on to like join the Shins and do a lot of cool records with them and other artists. But basically the process for that record was I would make a demo and I would send it to Yuki, and then he would kind of like deconstruct it to varying degrees. Like initially he was like really taking the songs apart and reharmonizing them, like putting new chords sometimes underneath it. Like he would choose half of the elements from my demo, and then he would like do a bunch of overdubs and do a bunch of editing and stuff. Over time, he took a more conservative approach with the songs, like, and a song like Fundamental Ground is essentially how I wrote it. Like, the chords and the melody and the lyrics and the song structure, and he more and a lot of the instrumentation I had recorded as well, and then he kind of like took it to the next level with the arrangement and the sound design and stuff. Some of the songs he really changed significantly, but it was a true collaboration. Like I was the main songwriter, but he has songwriting credit on a lot of the songs because he kind of changed a lot of the musical elements, and it was a real collaboration. And I kind of gave him free rein to do what he wanted. And like from the beginning, I definitely knew to trust him. He did some cool stuff, and I was in a position at that point to like not be precious about like my ideas and let other people come in and contribute.
I would say,
yeah. So it turned out really cool. A lot of cool synth sounds on it. I definitely wanted to have a more synthetic, weird lo-fi kind of sound on that, and we definitely achieved that. And it has some of my favorite stuff on there. I Fundamental Ground in particular, it's a unique song because it technically has 4 chords in it, but one chord only happens once, and so it's basically 3 chords, and it's this circular riff that it's kind of polyrhythmic. Like the melody kind of weaves in and out of this circular 3-chord riff, and it creates some really cool phrasing and melodic opportunities, and it's very simple. I'm happy with how that turned out, and it was a good experience working with Yuki for sure. And it was a time in my life where I was actually struggling a lot with some health issues, and so that was another reason that I wanted a collaborator. Was I didn't feel like I had the kind of the energy and the capacity to make another record on my own, and everything came together.
Of kind of all the stuff that we've talked about, what do you feel like is what you're most proud of? Not so much most proud of, but what do you feel like of all the things you've done? It's like, this is like, I don't know, the crown jewel or your finest moment, I guess, if you will.
That's an interesting question, I guess. I mean, I think that like I've taken time off from making music at different times of my life, like, and I've focused on different aspects of music making at different times, whether that's technical or compositional or performance or whatever. And I think I do have to say that I've gotten gradually better at doing this, like over time, I think. So like I think that, and this is kind of a common thing that people say, but I made a record last year called Daylight. It's just an EP, and I think that like that is the most fully realized, like, and most interesting piece of music that I've done is that EP. It kind of, there's no stringed instruments at all on it. It's like no guitars or bass guitar on there. It's all synthesizer and drums and drum machine. And I think it's the most interesting thing I've done, and probably the catchiest thing too. I do think, like you said, Fundamental Ground is a kind of, if I've written any kind of classic song, that's the one that people call out, and I can't disagree with them. I think it's a good song, and so probably between those two pieces, that EP I made last year and Fundamental Ground, those are kind of the best things I've done.
That's great. Oh, my alarm went off. Sorry, man.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking time to spend with me and just talking. I know you probably had been on plenty of podcasts before, but I really just appreciate you being so cool and just, I don't know, just being available. I really appreciate it. And maybe at some point we can do another one at some point. So I really want to thank you again for being on the show.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation. Nice to meet you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right, man. I will talk to you at some point soon.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you. All right, man. Bye-bye. Hey, I want to thank you, the listener, for tuning in to this latest episode. And thank you so much to TW Walsh. Really cool conversation. Totally awestruck at one point. It was just cool to talk to somebody I admire musically, and just a really cool opportunity for me. So I hope you enjoyed what you heard. I know a lot of it probably has been spoken about before, so I apologize for those that have heard these stories, but I think it's just really cool opportunity for me and this podcast as well. So thank you again, TW, and really looking forward to who we have coming up next. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.